Trump victory would be the end of Ukraine, Clinton. The former candidate also predicted that the ex-president will pull the Trump's victory would be the end of Ukraine, Clinton. The former candidate also predicted that the ex-president will pull the U.S. out of NATO if re-elected. If ex-US President Donald Trump is re-elected in 2024, it would be the downfall of both Ukraine and democracy in America, former Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton warned on Saturday. Speaking to the Financial Times, Clinton, who served as Secretary of State under Barack Obama and lost to Trump in the 2016 election, said she does not believe that her former rival will be successful this time. However, she claimed that if Trump does win in 2024, it will be the end of democracy in the United States and the end of Ukraine, as he will withdraw the country from NATO. Clinton went on to say that Russian President Vladimir Putin believed Trump would do so had he won the 2020 election. Trump was the gift that kept giving to people like Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Putin, she said, accusing him of being enamored of authoritarians and inept in any kind of strategic approach to China. She added that Trump was clearly going to do whatever Putin wanted on NATO. Clinton also said she once believed that China was preparing to make a move against Taiwan within a few years, but the Ukraine conflict discouraged Beijing from attempting to reclaim the island, which it regards as part of its sovereign territory. She went on to address widespread concerns that the current president, Joe Biden, 80, who confirmed that he would run again in late April, is too old for the job. While acknowledging that age is an issue, she urged voters to compare him to the man he is running against. Trump, who announced last November that he would run again in 2024, has been critical of Biden's approach to the Ukraine conflict. In January, he claimed that the president is systematically, but perhaps unknowingly, pushing us into what could soon be World War III. Trump has described himself as the only candidate capable of stopping the U.S. from sliding into a global conflict, promising he would settle the conflict in Ukraine very quickly if elected. CGTN Poll, 90% of respondents believe G7 accusations against China groundless. The G7 summit has issued a joint statement and other documents, making claims about economic coercion that allude to China. According to a global opinion poll conducted by CGTN, nearly 90% of global respondents believe that the G7's accusations against China are groundless. On the contrary, they point to the U.S. being the instigator of economic coercion and the biggest threat to global development. The poll, published on CGTN's English, Spanish, French, Arabic and Russian platforms, received responses from 55,365 people in 24 hours. China is now the largest trading partner of more than 120 countries and regions, and its trade with the world has benefited billions of people. In the survey, 92.33% of global respondents speak highly of China's great contribution to global trade, adding that China has become the world's economic engine. However, in recent years, the U.S. government has carried out all-round containment and repression against China, including imposing tariffs, a technology blockade in the Chinese chip field and suppressing Chinese high-tech enterprises using national security and the privacy of its citizens as an excuse. More than 60% of global respondents believe China is suffering from economic coercion from the U.S. In addition, up to 91.7% of the respondents believe that the real purpose of the U.S. hyping up the so-called Chinese economic coercion is to contain China's development and safeguard its hegemony. Over the years, the U.S. has suppressed almost all countries that violated its interests, gradually escalating its economic coercion in the world. In the survey, as many as 93.48% of respondents believe the U.S. has severely violated the principles of the market economy and fair competition, with 90.68% believing it fully exposes the hegemonic and bullying nature of the U.S. As of the 2021 fiscal year, more than 9,400 sanctions imposed by the U.S. have been implemented, and the U.S. has also imposed unilateral economic sanctions on nearly 40 countries around the world, affecting nearly half of the world's population. Over 90% of the respondents strongly oppose the U.S. actions, believing that they seriously disrupt economic globalization and regional economic integration. They think the U.S. should stop engaging in closed and exclusive small circles and refrain from reversing the course of economic globalization. Terrorists attack Pakistani military post in Balochistan. 3 soldiers dead, reports. A group of terrorists has attacked a military post in the southwestern Pakistani province of Balochistan, killing 3 soldiers, the Dawn newspaper reports. The attack occurred on Saturday in the Zargun area of Balochistan, Dawn said, citing a statement issued by Pakistan's Inter-Services Public Relations, ISPR, the military's media affairs wing. ISPR said that the military post attacked by terrorists was established recently to help check extortion efforts targeting coal mines in the area. 1 terrorist and 3 Pakistani soldiers were killed in an exchange of fire, as security forces retaliated, pushing back terrorists, the ISPR said. Dawn said that Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has condemned the attack. Germany pours cold water on Ukraine F-16 hopes. Berlin does not have any of the fighter jets for Kiev, and a pilot training program is a long-term project, Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said. Ukraine should not expect F-16 fighter jet deliveries from the West in the near future, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said on Sunday, while expressing support for a plan to train pilots to fly the advanced jets. Speaking on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Hiroshima, Japan, Scholz stated that what is connected with the training of pilots is a long-term project, adding that the U.S. has not yet decided what will happen at the end of the program. The project has a message for Russia. Russia cannot count on winning if it bets on a long war, he said. Scholz stated, however, that there is no chance Germany will take part in F-16 deliveries to Ukraine. First of all, everyone knows that we don't even have such aircraft. The Chancellor noted that Berlin is providing Kiev with what is immediately important now, including tanks, ammunition, and air defense equipment, adding that Germany will support Ukraine for as long as it is necessary, financially, humanitarianly and also with arms. We have mobilized our resources, he said. We can continue to do this for a long time. The comments come after U.S. President Joe Biden told G7 leaders on Friday that Washington will support a joint training program for Ukrainian pilots to fly F-16s, which would take place in Europe. This week, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said that he and his Dutch counterpart, Mark Rutte, agreed to establish an international coalition to provide Ukraine with combat air capabilities, supporting with everything from training to procuring F-16 jets, with a number of European countries supporting the move. On Friday, several U.S. media outlets reported that Washington will not block its allies from sending F-16s to Ukraine, which Kiev has been requesting for months. Commenting on the potential plans to send modern fighter jets to Ukraine, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko said that Western countries are sticking to the escalation scenario, which is fraught with colossal risks. In any case, all our plans will take this into consideration, and we have all the necessary means to achieve our goals regarding the military campaign in Ukraine, Grushko added. Quad leaders pledged to roll out open radio network in Pacific region. The leaders of Australia, India, Japan, and the United States announced on Saturday that, together with the Pacific archipelago nation of Palau, their countries would roll out an open radio network in the Indo-Pacific region to ensure developing economies access to telecoms markets. Today, we announce cooperation with Palau to establish a deployment of open radio access networks, Open RAN, the first in the Pacific. The Quad is committed to ensuring regional countries are not left behind as telecommunications markets and network architectures evolve, their joint statement read. The four said they supported access to innovations that would enable greater vendor choice for countries to expand and modernize their telecommunications networks. The Quad's third in-person summit took place on Saturday on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Japan's Hiroshima. It brought together Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Japanese Prime Minister Kishida Fumio and U.S. President Joe Biden. Separately, Quad demanded that both Myanmar and North Korea engage in constructive dialogue. They called on Myanmar's ruling military to free all those deemed arbitrarily detained and allow for a transition to an inclusive democracy, while North Korea was told to cease ballistic missile launches and give up its pursuit of nuclear weapons. China questions credibility of G7 members. Beijing has accused the US-led bloc of trying to impose its will on others. The international community will not allow the US-led G7 to dominate world affairs, nor will it fall in line with the pro-Western rules pushed by the group, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said in a statement on Saturday. China will never accept the so-called rules imposed by the few. The international community does not and will not accept the G7-dominated Western rules that seek to divide the world based on ideologies and values, the statement read. The Foreign Ministry went on to accuse the group of acting on behalf of America First policies and attempting to impose its will on others. That simply shows how little international credibility means to the G7, the ministry said. The Group of Seven is an informal club consisting of the US, Canada, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. The annual meetings are also typically attended by officials representing the EU. In a joint communiqué adopted at the summit in Hiroshima, Japan on Saturday, the G7 listed multiple allegations aimed at Beijing, including technology theft, economic coercion, and human rights abuses at home. The group said that it strongly opposes any unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force regarding Taiwan and the South China Sea. Beijing responded by saying that affairs related to Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and Tibet are purely China's internal affairs. China accused the G7 of endangering peace in the region by providing support for Taiwan independence forces. Although G7 members refrain from formally establishing diplomatic ties with Taiwan, the U.S. has sold weapons to Taipei and promised to defend it from a potential attack from the mainland. U.S. politicians have also met with officials from Taiwan, prompting harsh criticism from Beijing, which opposes any form of diplomatic contacts with the Taipei authorities. Biden says default on debt not an option, Congress leaders must live up to commitments. U.S. President Joe Biden said on Sunday amid ongoing debt limit negotiations that the U.S. defaulting on its debt is not an option and congressional leaders must live up to their commitments. It's time for Republicans to accept that there is no bipartisan deal to be made solely on their partisan terms. They have to move as well. All four congressional leaders agree with me that default is not an option, Biden said during a press conference in Japan. He said he would speak with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on his flight back to Washington. Biden added that he believes a deal can be reached with Republican lawmakers on raising the U.S. debt limit. I think that we can reach an agreement, Biden said during a press conference. Part of what I've been arguing from the beginning is a need to consider the tax structure as well as cutting spending. I'm willing to cut spending, and I proposed cuts and spending of over $1 trillion. Biden added that he could not guarantee that the Republican leadership would not create a default by force by doing something outrageous. I can't guarantee that the Republicans wouldn't force a default by doing something outrageous, Biden told a press conference. U.S. President Joe Biden and Republican lawmakers are currently engaged in ongoing negotiations to reach a deal to raise the debt limit before the U.S. government risks defaulting as early as June. Debt ceiling talks have been ongoing for months, but only within the last few weeks have matters intensified, with both parties appearing to make some movement to a looming deal. However, an official confirmation has not yet been made. China-US relations. The United States is not seeking to decouple from China, however, it wants to de-risk and diversify its ties within Beijing, Biden stressed. The U.S. president expects the relations between the United States and China to thaw following the incident earlier this year when the U.S. shot down an alleged Chinese spy balloon in its airspace, he said. This silly balloon that was carrying 2 freight cars worth of spy equipment was flying over the United States, and it got shot down and everything changed in terms of talking to one another. I think you're going to see that it began to thaw very shortly, Biden said during a press conference regarding the communication between the US and Chinese governments. Biden said that he was not willing to trade certain things with China due to Beijing's building its military. We are more secure. We all have talked about China's building its military, and it is building its military, and that's why I made it clear that I am not prepared to trade certain items with China, Biden told a press conference. The United States does not expect Taiwan to declare independence, but Washington will continue to help improve the island's ability to defend itself, Biden said. We don't expect Taiwan to independently declare independence either, but in the meantime we're going to continue to put Taiwan in a position that they can defend themselves, Biden said during a press conference in Japan. Biden further said there was a clear understanding among most of the U.S. allies that if China were to act unilaterally against Taiwan, there would be a response. U.S. aid to Ukraine. The United States will continue to provide both economic and security aid to Ukraine as long as it requires, U.S. President Joe Biden said on Sunday. We are going to continue to provide economic, humanitarian, and security assistance to Ukraine, so it can stand strong as long as it needs to, Biden said. Biden said that having F-16 aircraft would not have helped Ukraine with Artyomovsk, Bakhmut. With regards to F-16s, F-16s would not have helped in that regard at all. It was unnecessary. For example, let's take Artyomovsk, for example, it would not have any additional added consequence, Biden said. Western countries have been supplying military aid to Ukraine since the start of hostilities in February 2022. The aid evolved from artillery munitions and training in 2022 to heavier weapons, including tanks, later that year and in 2023. The U.S. has committed over $30 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since President Joe Biden took office, according to a tally on the Pentagon's website, last updated on May 3. The Kremlin, in turn, has repeatedly warned against continued arms deliveries to Kiev. What is the fastest missile in the world and how much does speed really matter? Russia's Kh-47M2 Kinzhal hypersonic missile made the news this week after destroying a Patriot radar station and 5 launchers in overnight strikes in Kiev on May 16. How did the Kinzhal get through? What other countries possess ultra-fast missiles? Why is it that speed isn't always everything? Check out our explainer to find out. According to independent U.S. media, the Patriots fired off as many as 32 interceptor missiles at the Kinzhals, targeting them in a desperate attempt to intercept them. The Pentagon went into damage control, mindful that admitting the missile defense system's weaknesses against Russian missiles would undermine global faith in the superiority of U.S. weapons. Patriot missile maker Raytheon saw up to $10 billion shaved from its stock valuation over the news that its covered weapons system had been hit. U.S. officials claimed the systems were damaged but assured that they had not been destroyed. Ukraine's military, meanwhile, claimed that it shot down 6 Kinzhals without losing any Patriots. The Russian military offered no comment. But what else does Russia have in its missile arsenal? What is the fastest Russian missile? The Kinzhal is one of the speediest and most advanced missile systems in Russia's arsenal, but not the only one. The weapon is an air-launched hypersonic missile with a range between 2,000 and 3,000 kilometers, and a reported speed of Mach 10, 11,925 kilometers per hour, or even higher. The Patriot's interceptors are significantly slower, capable of accelerating to Mach 2.8, 3,340 kilometers per hour, in the case of the PAC-1, and Mach 4.1, 5,000 kilometers per hour, in the case of its PAC-2 and PAC-3 variants. The Kinzhal is not the fastest missile in Russia's arsenal, with the strategic Rs-28 Sarmat, and the submarine-launched Bulava missiles capable of accelerating to speeds up to Mach 20, 25,500 kilometers per hour, and Mach 24, 28,600 plus km/h, respectively. And while these are not hypersonic missiles, but ballistic weapons which travel into space and then release warheads that fall to Earth. They are capable of maneuvering like their hypersonic cousins, ULAVs at their boost stage, Sarma warheads as they approach targets, or avant-garde hypersonic glide vehicles fitted aboard Sarmats, theoretically making their interception impossible. Theoretically, because these weapons have never been tested in actual warfare, and hopefully, never will, because their use would likely signal the start of a Third World War. When it comes to missiles, speed isn't everything, and the lower intercept speed wouldn't be a problem if the Patriot were locking onto a traditional ballistic missile flying at a known trajectory. The problem is, missiles like the Kinzhal are capable of maneuvering in flight, making course corrections to make it more difficult to predict its trajectory and exact course. What is the number one fastest missile in the world? Determining a missile's maximum speed depends on definitions. As stated above, strategic intercontinental ballistic missiles typically have the highest speed characteristics, with the U.S. ground-based LGM-30 Minuteman having a rating of Mach 23, 28,200 km per hour, and the UGM-133 Trident II submarine-launched missile a top speed of Mach 24 in its terminal phase. The Chinese DF-41 ICBM is reportedly capable of flying up to Mach 25, 30,600 km per hour, making it perhaps the fastest ballistic missile in the world today. As for hypersonics, the avant-garde glide vehicle appears to enjoy the coveted top spot, with a maximum boost speed of up to Mach 27, 32,200 km, in near-space conditions, although this falls to an estimated Mach 15 to 20 by atmospheric drag on descent. What is the BrahMos missile, and does Russia use it? The BrahMos ramjet supersonic cruise missile jointly developed by Russia and India carries the distinction of the fastest cruise missile in the world, with a top speed of Mach 3.5, about 4,175 km per hour, fast enough to make short work of enemy vessels and ground-based targets and their air defenses. A new variant of the missile, the BrahMos 2, is under development, with an expected maximum speed of up to Mach 8, 9,800 km per hour, thanks to innovative use of a scramjet air-breathing jet engine. The BrahMos 2 is a development of the 3M-22 Zircon, a Russian scramjet-powered anti-ship cruise missile which entered into service in January. Why are high-speed missiles so important to Russia's deterrence doctrine? Why does Russia seem to be at the top or near the top of most rankings when it comes to the capabilities of its hypersonic, ballistic, and cruise missiles? The answer is simple. Inheriting a massive head start on advanced missile technology and the blueprints for the earliest hypersonic missiles from the USSR, which began work on them in the late 1960s, missile tech was one of those areas where R&D investments were not totally curtailed in the 1990s. In 2002, after the United States unceremoniously pulled out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, President Putin ordered for work on existing projects to be accelerated, and for new ones to be laid down, amid concerns that the creation of a U.S. strategic missile defense system could neutralize and render obsolete our entire nuclear potential. These efforts bore fruit. And in 2020, Putin said that for the first time in its modern history, Russia had come to possess the most modern types of weapons, which are far superior in terms of their force, power, speed, and, very importantly, in terms of accuracy compared to all which existed before them and exist today. These upgrades to Russia's missile capabilities couldn't have been more timely. Because at the same time that Washington scrapped the ABM Treaty, the Pentagon began working on Prompt Global Strike, an ambitious but highly dangerous initiative proposing mass precision-guided conventional missile strikes to decapitate adversaries' political and military leadership and missile deterrence, thus stripping them of the ability to retaliate to aggression. Basically, the possession of ultra-high-speed missiles capable of maneuvering, evading missile defenses and masking their destination provide Russia with a kind of missile shield, allowing the country's leadership to sleep soundly at night in the knowledge that surprise enemy aggression would be met with an inevitable and devastating response, thereby deterring any itchy trigger fingers at the Pentagon and forcing it to keep ideas like prompt global strike on the drawing board. Drug dealer released by Obama charged with attempted murder. Alton Mills' life sentence was commuted by then-President Barack Obama in 2016 after 20 years behind bars. Convicted crack dealer Alton Mills, who had his life sentence commuted by former U.S. President Barack Obama in 2016, was arrested and charged with 3 counts of attempted murder on Tuesday, according to Illinois State Police. Mills allegedly fired his gun multiple times into a vehicle while driving in Posen, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, last Sunday, according to a police report. The passenger in the vehicle was hit and reportedly hospitalized with life-threatening injuries. Mills was sentenced to life in prison without parole in 1994 on federal crack cocaine conspiracy charges, having acted as a street-level courier in a drug deal. Because he had twice been previously convicted of possessing small amounts of crack cocaine, he was subject to the harsh 3 strikes mandatory minimum sentencing laws typical of the 1990s war on drugs. He had never served time in prison on either previous charge, and his judge reportedly disagreed with the draconian sentence he was forced to hand down. Along with 94 other nonviolent federal prisoners, Mills' sentence was commuted in 2016 as part of a clemency initiative by Obama. He had spent 22 years in prison, having entered the system aged 23. Illinois Senator Dick Durbin, a Democrat, had joined Mills' sentencing judge Marvin Aspen in petitioning Obama for his release. 1 in 5 prisoners in the U.S. is incarcerated on a nonviolent drug offense, and 1 in 3 prisoners incarcerated for drugs is held in the federal prison system, according to the NGO Prison Policy Initiative. While mandatory minimum sentences for drug possession have been significantly reduced since the 1990s and some states have decriminalized marijuana, once responsible for the vast majority of drug arrests, prison reform advocates have called for alternatives to prison for drug crimes to increase the likelihood of rehabilitation. While the 2016 study by the Brennan Center for Justice had estimated that as many as 39% of the prison population of the U.S. could be released with little public safety impact, a growing number of politicians have urged caution in reducing criminal penalties, citing spiking crime rates in states like New York and California. Moscow says G7 irreversibly degraded, summit's decisions politicized. The politicized decisions made at the G7 summit in Japan have shown that the group has irreversibly degraded, the Russian Foreign Ministry said on Sunday. It's the G7 summit main result is a series of statements filled with odious anti-Russian and anti-Chinese passages. This was yet another G7 meeting that has resulted in politicized statements aimed at drawing division lines in international relations, the statement read. The G7 used to be a group whose members coordinated their positions on a variety of important international issues, whereas now it has irreversibly degraded, the ministry said. The G7 has become literally fixated on a comprehensive confrontation with Russia. At the US's behest, it assumed the role of a headquarters for the planning of sanctions and other hybrid war tools against our country, including deciding the scale and timing of Western arms supplies to Kiev. That is the group's purpose of existing today, the ministry said. From May 19 to 21, the Japanese city of Hiroshima was hosting the G7's annual top-level summit. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was invited as a guest, which the Russian Foreign Ministry said ultimately turned the event into a propaganda show. U.S. Republican donor backing Tucker Carlson for president. The draft Tucker PAC launched its first campaign ad, urging the party to pick the TV host, who doesn't want the job. A political action campaign calling itself Draft Tucker PAC released a campaign ad on Thursday, urging the Republican Party to pick former Fox News host Tucker Carlson as its candidate for U.S. president in 2024. Republicans need a new leader. And Tucker Carlson is ready to lead, the 30-second spot announces, describing the conservative pundit as witty, sharp, and someone who mocks woke nonsense. Carlson will whip Biden in a debate, the commercial assures voters, insisting no one in America is more articulate. Led by former Texas congressional candidate and Republican donor Chris Ekstrom, the draft Tucker PAC, which filed its papers last month after Carlson left Fox News, still has to convince its eponymous candidate to run. Ekstrom told The Hill he was concerned that neither the Republican frontrunner, former President Donald Trump, nor Trump's leading challenger, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, is pushing the conversation in the right direction. "I'm very concerned that they're going to not move the debate as far right as it ought to be," he told the outlet, without explaining where the declared candidates fell short in their positions. Describing the PAC as exceptionally well-funded, Ekstrom explained it will sponsor polls and release more ads on radio and digital as well as TV, while populating its board with major conservatives. He claimed Carlson had been testing the water for quite a while regarding presidential candidacy. Earlier this month, Carlson joked about running for president in text messages with a reporter, something he has done several times before. However, he has dismissed the idea when asked about it seriously, telling former New York Times journalist Ben Smith last year that he was content working as a talk show host and had no desire for power. While the media establishment have made it clear that they believe a Carlson candidacy would fail, they will also not stop talking about it, with around half a dozen articles discussing his chances emerging since the journalist left Fox. Carlson's primetime news show far outstripped its competitors in ratings, bringing in over 3 million viewers nightly. The video he released on Twitter following his departure has pulled in over 84 million views. Earlier this month, he announced plans to launch a news show on the platform. Russian lower house council to weigh measures against Poland on Monday. The Council of the State Duma, the lower house of the Russian parliament, will consider taking measures against Poland on Monday, including a possible ban on transit of its trucks through Russia, which could cost Warsaw as much as €8.5 billion, $9.19 billion, State Duma Speaker Vyacheslav Volodin said on Sunday. The right thing to do would be to ban Poland from profiting from Russia today, to stop Polish trucks from passing through our country. Let them reload goods onto Russian trucks. Our citizens will earn from the shipping. Poland's expenses in this case could be around €8.5 billion, Volodin said on Telegram. Although Poland owes its statehood to Russia, it has betrayed the historical memory by demolishing World War II monuments to Soviet soldiers and closing Russian schools, the speaker said. The Soviet people spent over $750 billion in today's money for Poland's post-war reconstruction and development, having built over 800 industrial, energy and transport facilities, he added. Poland should therefore return the territories it acquired after World War II and repay the funds spent on it during and after the war to Russia, Volodin said. Nebraska senator starts bizarre pro-trans chant during session. Democratic legislator Makala Kavanaugh was voicing her opposition to a bill banning sex change for minors. Nebraska Senator Makala Kavanaugh spoke out against a proposed bill banning gender surgery for minors with a repetitive monotone chant. Repeating, "Transgender people belong here, we need trans people, we love trans people" close to 36 times with increasing intensity until she was shouting and sobbing during Friday's legislative session. Kavanaugh explained this was what they are saying in the rotunda, referring to protesters who had gathered to oppose the proposed legislation. While she began hitting the lectern rhythmically in time with her chant as if to encourage her fellow legislators to join in, none did. After about 3 minutes, she wrapped up the chant, declaring "You matter and I am fighting for you. I will not stop today, I will not stop tomorrow." Kavanaugh previously warned that people would leave Nebraska if the bill passed and claimed that the lawmakers' guilt would come back to haunt them. "You have to live with the fact that you vote to take away people's rights," she said, after suggesting legislators' children would turn on them. At least 6 of the demonstrators were arrested on Friday after they started throwing what appeared to be bloody tampons onto the Senate floor and chanting "shame." While lawmakers were voting, including 2 in connection with punching a state trooper. Governor Jim Pillen has pledged to sign the bill, which ultimately passed after Republicans amassed enough votes to override a filibuster. It forbids gender surgery on patients under the age of 19, with exceptions for some individuals who were already receiving gender transitioning treatments, and sets rules for the use of puberty blockers and hormone therapies. It also bans abortion after 12 weeks except in cases of rape and incest and to save the mother's life. Republican State Senator Julie Slamet told Fox News that Kavanaugh might have unwittingly gotten the bill passed through her bizarre performance, explaining that her colleagues resented how the Democrat had got up and ran her mouth because she was just overjoyed that the national media was there to give her some more attention. After declaring in March that she would burn the session to the ground over this bill, Kavanaugh led an effort to filibuster and otherwise disrupt every bill in the legislative session, slowing the process down with hundreds of amendments and frivolous motions. Due to the difficulties in bringing any bill to a vote, lawmakers opted to combine the abortion bill with the gender treatment bill. Nebraska joins 17 other states that have enacted laws restricting or banning gender transition surgery, hormones, and other transgender therapies for minors, and several other states including Texas and Missouri are currently considering similar legislation.